of memories, his reminiscences in 8 volumes. Hari has been speaking about these volumes from many days now. This series marks the conclusion, and we have the pleasurable duty of sharing a good news with all of you. Hari has been instrumental in bringing out DVG's writings through English and introducing them to the larger populace. DVG has been known to a greater section of people because of the translations that have appeared in English, primarily due to Hari's selfless efforts in this direction for 7, 8, nearly a decade now. And also, he has been engaged in works that were very close to DVG's heart as well. So, with all this background, the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs has thought it appropriate to felicitate Shri Hari Ravikumar the day after tomorrow. It also happens to be the day where the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale series of talks will be concluded, so that would be a befitting occasion as well. So I request all the listeners here, everybody who is interested in DVG's literature and his legacy, to please participate day after tomorrow in large numbers. And the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale series of talks, Hari has greatly helped us by not just overseeing the entire translation process, but also giving widely received, well received series of talks on the same subject. Now it is no longer possible for anyone to make the excuse that, oh, I do not know the Kannada language, so I am not able to read Kannada works, DVG's works. The works are now available in English, and Hari has exposited on them from various standpoints. He has made references to DVG's other works, and more than anything, how his mind worked, how it always throbbed with ideas to spiritualize public life, as was his motto and ideal for long years. And I thank Hari for all his services and request him to please begin.
Om Tat Sat. Ellarigu Namaskara. Good evening, friends. It's a great pleasure for me to be back here at the Gokhale Institute. And thank you very much for this wonderful honor. It's a blessing from DVG, from S.R. Ramaswamy and Shavtadhani R. Ganesh for me. It's a great honor. Recently on Twitter, I was seeing a video of King's Cross Station in London. A young boy came running and rammed into the wall, and then feeling very embarrassed, he ran away. It was between the platform number 9 and platform number 10 of the station. For those of you who don't know the background, in the Harry Potter books, series of books by J.K. Rowling, in the first book, Philosopher's Stone, also released as Sorcerer's Stone, it is the 9 3/4 platform where they go inside to take the Hogwarts Express. So there was this boy who thought really he can go and get into this secret platform. One side, it was very impressive to see his dedication to Harry Potter. On the other side, I was feeling this is so foolish when we have the opportunity to get into this kind of magical world by taking a copy of the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale or any of the other writings. Why would you want to physically go and hit your head against the wall? This is such a work where you just pick up any of the volumes, and if you start reading, it is like going into that magical world of Hogwarts or anything else. Takes you to a totally different time. That is the power of the writing of D.V. Gundappa. At the outset, I must share with you the good news that all the 8 volumes of the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale under the title Art Gallery of Memories has been released. 11 volumes of the select writings of D.V. Gundappa in English have come out. The Jivana Dharma Yoga, one of the seminal works of D.V. Gundappa, has come in English. And very soon the Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati is going to bring out 3 volumes of DVG's works. One titled Epic Writings, which is a collection of all his writings on the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in English translation. The second book is called Poetics, which is a collection, a sangraha of all his writings on aesthetics and poetry and poetics brought in one volume. And the third is a translation of the book Vidyaranyara Samakalinaru, as contemporaries of Vidyaranya. Extracts from this book have been translated. So this represents a huge oeuvre of DVG's works available in English, and of course the Mankutimana Kagga has been translated many times into English. So a lot of his writings are available, and like Shashikiran was mentioning, there is no excuse not to read his work just because we don't know Kannada. Also, through the course of these discussions, I have taken the opportunity here and there to express my views and opinions about certain things, about reflections on society and so forth. These are all what I have gleaned from reading DVG, from Hiriyanna, P.V. Kane and so many other people. I have felt that it adds certain context to the discussion. So I thank you for your indulgence for the same. I had spoken in the last series about the origin and the growth of the hotel industry and the restaurant industry in Bangalore. Now we will come to the drama companies of Bellary. We are in the middle of the 7th volume. I hope to complete this and possibly start the 8th volume through the course of today's presentation. Sometime in 1909, a very well-known drama company called Sumanorama Sabha, or perhaps Suguna Vilasa Sabha, DVG has recalled these names from memory, they came to Bangalore, and the director of this drama company was one advocate, Kolachalam Srinivasa Rao, who was a well-known advocate and director of the drama company. And it was Sahukar Netkalappa, all of you know the Netkalappa circle. So it was Netkalappa who basically made all the arrangements for their food and stay and everything in Bangalore. Kanekal Netkalappa was a prominent legislator and a contractor. He was a businessman, also a philanthropist. Another drama company from Bellary. So Bellary had a great passion for drama. Another company was the Sarasa Vinodini Sabha, which was established a little earlier than the Sumanorama Sabha. This Sarasa Vinodini Sabha was started by one Dharmavaram Krishnamacharya, who was also himself a playwright, and he had written, he was very well versed in Sanskrit and Telugu. He had written a work called Chitra-shaale. He himself was also an actor. He used to play the role of Bahuka. When Nala is bitten by the snake, Nahusha, with the Karkotaka Visha, he changes into a dwarfish and ugly looking character, because Nala is a very good looking man, but when he is kind of in a incognito state, he is Bahuka, and that role was played by our Andhra Nataka Pitamaha Dharmavaram Ramakrishnacharyalu or Krishnacharya. DVG says it is such a remarkable play, this Chitra-shaale, and possibly the public has forgotten about it, and such a play should always be kept fresh in the memory of the people. But in the last 50 years, it has not happened. He's unaware of that, DVG says. This Dharmavaram Krishnacharya had a nephew, a very brilliant advocate, T. Raghavacharya, Tadepatri Raghavacharya, who is also known as Bellary Raghava or Bellary Raghavacharya, who was well known as an advocate but more known as an actor. He was the main artist of the Sumanorama Sabha. So some people said, oh, he's a nephew of Dharmavaram Krishnacharya. Instead of, acting in the Sarasa Vinodini Sabha, he has joined Kolachalam Srinivasa Rao's thing. But DVG says it was no such mischief or manastapa, there is no difference of opinion. It just so happened he was working with Kolachalam's company. Now, Kolachalam Srinivasa Rao was from the lineage of the well-known Sanskrit commentator Kolachalam Mallinatha Suri. And Kolachalam Srinivasa Rao's elder brother, Venkat Rao, went to England and became a barrister. He was very well known in his town. He built a town hall and did a lot of philanthropic activities. Kolachalam Srinivasa Rao was a great scholar himself. He wrote a treatise in English called History of Drama. He also wrote this play called Vijayanagara Patanamu, the fall of Vijayanagara. When they came to Bangalore, there would be a lot of actors in the drama company. Along with that, so many friends and other associates would be there. And everybody would be fed by Netkalappa's largesse. It was a wonderful gathering. The main Bangalore camp of the company was in the Sitarama Mandira building, which was east of the Anjaneya temple near the eye hospital at Bangalore Fort. And for the second camp was west of the Tipu Sultan's summer palace. In addition to Kolacharam Srinivasa Rao, there were a few other people like Karnool Ram Rao, Vattam Sham Rao, Chidambar Rao, and so on. So Vattam Sham Rao was also, he later created this student education society and so forth. Now, about Tadapatri Raghavacharya, was a very good actor. He was not a very good singer, so he would just shout out the lyrics. And DVG says you should know the pitch of his singing only by his actions, what he would give to the harmonium player. Because those days they would have, Kari Eradu or Bili Muru, this kind of indication. So only from that you would know that what pitch he is singing. He was not a very good singer, but he was very enthusiastic and he had great ingenuity. So once he was playing the role of Pathan Rustum, and when he was twirling his mustaches, one of them came off in his hand. So he said, "Oh my God, what a wretched thing you are, how troublesome you are." And he pulled out the other mustache and continued acting. So there was this kind of spontaneity of his acting. Finally, when the company, the final performance of the drama, there was a wire that had come from Tadapatri that his mother was not well. And he had to urgently leave. Before that, there was a kind of Sanmana, and Srinivasa Rao asked DVG to say a few words about Raghava, and he spoke some very nice words, and they formed a close friendship for many years. Then DVG writes about the Seeded District Association, the Amateur Dramatics Association, the ADA, which even now the Rangamandira is there on JC Road. After the Seeded District Association kind of faded away, the ADA activities started. DVG was very closely involved with all these things. Although he doesn't mention this directly, you can make out because of the kind of activities that they were doing, and when we see the alignment to DVG's larger vision of public life. So few of the important activities DVG lists out. The Lalita Kala Mahotsava, for which they invited Rabindranath Tagore. Then the second conference they invited Sarojini Naidu. Then the third time they invited C.R. Reddy, Kattimanchi Ramalinga Reddy. They worked towards reducing the hardships that were caused because of influenza. Then they published some of the plays that were written, like T.P. Kailasam's Toldugatti and things like that. They celebrated Kalidasa Jayanti. So a lot of these activities, you can see that DVG's hand is somewhere there, because in many other instances also, these are the kind of things he has undertaken. Many of the episodes refer to individuals, although they just come as a passing reference. It is probably the only time we hear these names, and when we go and explore, like Dr. Ganesh has done in his lectures also, all these people are remarkable individuals. In some cases, DVG has taken some time to write about them, but if somebody were to go behind searching every one of these names, I'm sure they are all remarkable personalities. So for example, in this episode, he talks about P. Kodan Rao and the social service that he did. He also mentions about one B.K. Ram Prasad, who was a young man who was working for the influenza patients and so forth. Then we come to a very beautiful episode called the Grama Devatas of our town. In this episode, DVG talks a lot about Mudabagal, and later on in the 8th volume, he goes into much greater detail when he talks about his family and his ancestry. It's important when we try to go back into the past and reconstruct some of the details. One of the indicators is how much things costed. When we have a sense of what certain things costed, then based on that we can get a picture of how that society was. So one of the modern indicators is the price of a McDonald's burger in different countries, and based on that they calculate certain economic situation. Or the cost of milk, for example, is one of the indicators. When we see across the last 50 or 100 years the cost of milk, then we know around that we can estimate the rest of the things. So here he says, in the old days, the cost for 12 serus of fine red rice was 1 rupee. So this seru is this measure, which was very common, seru and pav and chatak. This was the measures those days. And 6 coconuts for 1/16th of a rupee. So that means you can imagine, if you had 1 rupee, you would have 96 coconuts. Today, we know the cost. this just gives an idea. Of course, costs are different because the salaries also were very low those days, and today the salary is much more. Even when his father used to buy items at these, very, very reasonable costs, his father's uncle Ramana would say, "You're paid too much. You should at least when you pay a rupee, you should get 16 serus, not 12 serus. You should get 8 coconuts and not 6." So this was the kind of mentality that was prevalent when DVG's father was young. After this, DVG goes about giving us an overview of the social lay of the land. This is, for some people may think it's like the caste census of today, but it is very different. It basically talks about the variety of people that were living together in harmony, the diversity that existed and the harmony that existed. So this is something which we see in many of the writings of DVG, especially when he talks about his childhood and Mudabagal and the smaller towns. There's a lot of harmony and coexistence between people from different varnas. So a lot of times when we read the popular narratives that, oh, this certain group was oppressed and certain group was oppressing and things like that, when we read these kind of instances, we get a good sense of how people actually lived, because these are all lived experiences and not narratives. He talks about Reddis, Kurubas, Banejigas, Vokkaligas, and in the Komti Pete, a lot of the Vaishyas were living, the Kopparas, the Kajayas, Pachis, all the Tavvas, all these various Vaishya families who were living, and the kind of charitable activities that they did. He talks about one Kaparthi Ramaswamy Shetty. There is a famous Anjaneya Swami Devalaya in Mudabagal, and in that there is one shrine of the Venkataramana. There he wanted to have a kavacha built, kavacha made for Venkataramana Murthy, and also to have a stone vigraha of Devi Padmavati. So during the time the kavacha was made, Ramaswamy Shetty was staying there and overseeing all these activities. And when he was there, he would arrange for some discourses or some bhajanas or something in the evening, some activity. So which shows the cultural refinement of the people of that time. Few years all this was done, and the kavacha was made, and the prana pratisthapana of the Padmavati Murthy was done. A few years later, Kaparthi Ramaswamy Shetty breathed his last in his ancestral town in Kappalamadagu. So all these people had gone. DVG was a young boy at that time, so he received a dakshina, a doddane. Doddane was, I think, 2 annas, which is a silver coin of those days. So he was given a doddane. When he came back home, he got a thrashing because he said, "This is only for Vaidikas. We are a Laukikas. We should not take this money." And it was seen as a kind of a transgression on his part. Then, of course, there is a lot of interesting episodes in this chapter about the Ranabali, about the Challamudda, various aspects of the village life and the people, how they celebrated rituals. Interesting character who comes here is one Ronuru Venkatrama Shastri. So this Ronuru Venkatrama Shastri is probably older to DVG by a few years, 5-6 years. They both appeared for the lower secondary exam in 1897-98. Those days, to write the lower secondary exam, which is basically equivalent of the 8th standard today. Lower secondary was 8th standard, then matriculation was 11th standard. After the matriculation, they have to do an inter, then FA course and so on. So lower secondary examination was held in Kolar. At that point of time, DVG's grandfather, who was a well-known lawyer, he was staying in Kolar. They had a big house. So a few of the friends and the teacher, one of the teachers, Subbarao, they all had gone to Kolar, and they were staying in DVG's grandfather's very spacious house. One of the clients of his grandfather was an elderly gentleman, Cheduru Ramaswamy Iyengar. He came inside and he saw this Venkatrama Shastri wearing a Rudraksha. So he said, "Oh, what is this Rudraksha? Is it going to help you in your exams?" So of course it's going to help in my exam because it will make me fearless. When I am protected by it, I will do very well. It will, I can do whatever. So in that case, can you do whatever I say? Yes, I can do whatever you want. then can you go to Antaragange and fetch a pot of water? Antaragange is a hill in Kolar which is known for its water, and also it's kind of underground and it's a little scary. He says, yes, I can go to Antaragange right away. So you should join me when I fetch the water, because if I bring the water and you don't believe me, then it's a problem. So you should come with me. Otherwise, if I should go alone, then you should believe me that it's from Antaragange. Then immediately Ramaswamy Iyengar realized he is tricked, and he said, I'm impressed by your courage, and he gifted him one quarter of a rupee. Later, of course, there is a description about how the village people dealt with plague and the kind of beliefs that they had, and the Utlu festival which was celebrated and so on. Finally, there is one very nice episode about the ancient Someshwara temple, which was reinvigorated because of the efforts of one Mokshagundam Venkateshaya, who was the Amaldar at that time. I think he was a cousin of Sarim Vishweshwaraya. So he had a very commanding personality. DVG writes, I remember him with gratitude. There is a special reason, because he called DVG once, a very young boy. He says, I have a book that you should read. I will give it to you. You should read it and tell me what you think about it, and you should give it back to me. So the book was written by Plato, The Trial and Death of Socrates. It was translated from the original Greek into English by some church or somebody. DVG says, even now I read Plato's writings. More than mere reading, I do a parayana. It is so important for me that I do parayana of the work. It is a work that fuels the lamp of man's inner light. So Mokshagundam Venkateshaya had identified the profundity. Then DVG talks about interesting episode of two Muslim brethren, he says, who had come to meet his father. Both of them were his father's disciples. One of them was Kashti Haidar Sahib, a very interesting character. Kashti Haidar Sahib spoke very good Kannada and Telugu. We can see, again, one of the things we see in a lot of these episodes is there is no language mania. People in these episodes, they know Kannada and Telugu and Tamil and multiple languages without any effort. He talks about one, later we will come to this character, Bandi Rasul Khan, who is a cart driver. He is familiar with 3 or 4 languages. So today there is this madness of, opposing some other language. All these are our own languages. There is no other language. All are Indian languages. So therefore, at that point of time, we don't see this language mania. People from all communities spoke multiple languages. And Haidar Sahib was a very good friend of DVG's grandfather, and he was also the Sarpanch of the village. And DVG narrates a very nice episode of one Dr. Venkatacharya, who was one of the doctors in the hospital of the village. He was supposed to get a transfer. At that point of time, there is a lady who was a midwife, a Christian lady, Rajamma, who put a case against this doctor. He said, oh, this Dr. Venkatacharya has taken 500 rupees from me, he has to return it. So then there was, because it's a dispute, it goes to the panchayat, and Sarpanch is Kashti Haidar Sahib. He says, okay, what is the proof you have that this man has given you 500 rupees? So this Rajamma hands over a piece of paper. It is it's not a stamp paper. It's not anything. There is no witness sign. Nothing. It's just written. It's scribbled on the paper that have taken 500 rupees or something. It is a plain paper. So this Rajamma gave it to one of the panchayat members, Srinivas Rao. Srinivas Rao saw this and he gave it to Muniappa. Muniappa saw this and he says, they give it to the next person. They say, what is this? There is no witness, there is no signature. How do we know the person who has signed is the doctor? What other evidence do you have? The language which is used is not administrative language. So we cannot, be sure. Then this Rajamma says, no, it was an internal dealing. So therefore, how can there be any witness? This is how it is. Then immediately Haidar Sahib says, if it's internal matter, it should be dealt internally. And he tore the paper. Then this lady was shocked. He said, yes, how is it that a person like you will have 500 rupees? It is a made up, cooked up story. It's very clear. So don't come and give us this cock and bull story. Then after that, immediately she confessed and she cried and pleaded guilty. Immediately, Kasti Haidar Sahib says, okay, you are come here seeking some money. Okay, you take some money and go. He gave us some 20 rupees or something, substantial amount of money. He said, you take this and you go. So this was the worldly wisdom that he had. DVG says, this is the path of those who have realized human nature. So when we are dispensing justice, it is not just blindly doing something based on the rule book. It's also about understanding human nature and behavior, and based on that you are doing something. DVG also writes about Venkatacharya that it was on his table for the first time I saw that Chicago lectures of Swami Vivekananda. I borrowed that book, and at that time when I read it, I could not understand, so I just copied down all the things so later I could understand. Time and again we see, DVG has mentioned, has recorded with great gratitude all the books he had borrowed from different people and read. Today, any book you want practically is available. You go to archive.org or you go to some website, you will get most of the books, or if you go to Amazon, you will definitely get it. So there is no sense of urgency to read something and give it back. Earlier when we were young, we used to go and get it from the library. We had to return it within a span of 1 week. Otherwise there was a late fee of some 10 paisa per day and so forth. Now the books are easily available. We have access to them. So therefore we don't end up reading them. Those days every book that was borrowed and read was treasured. So I think sometimes this non-availability of things teaches us the value of those things. Then there is a nice episode called Nanna Mahasuli Udyoga, my supervisory assignment. Even here, although DVG is reminiscing about his childhood, he gives some historical context. That is why the Jnaapaka-chitra-shaale series is not just a series of memoirs about individuals. It is also a cultural commentary and social history of the old Mysore region. He talks about how when from Bangalore, when we go to Madras, those days the only way was Bangalore to Kolar to Mulubagal and then onward to Madras. That what today is called the old Madras road. That was the route taken. When we move from Kolar to Mulubagal, the 18th mile is Mulubagal, when you go towards the direction of Madras. And from there, when you go about 2 or 3 furlongs, which is about 400 to 600 meters, then we find on the route the village of Someshwarapalya. Now, Someshwarapalya, he says, there is a row of trees, and the produce of those trees belong to my grandfather. Now, what is the meaning of this? Some random trees in this place, how can it belong to the grandfather? Then he talks about the arrangement of the road trees and how this system came into place. Many years under the rule of the Hindu kings, it was very common for people to plant trees because that was supposed to give punya. So whether digging a well or planting a tree, these are all known as, these are all well known to give punya, and a lot of people engage in it. But for some reason, this tradition had slowly gone away. So the road trees did not exist. These kind of trees were not there. It was quite barren at that point of time. Now it was necessary for the British Army to march some, once in a month or twice a month from Madras to Bangalore and Bangalore to Madras. At that time, Bangalore was a cantonment and Madras was the Madras presidency. So they were marching back and forth. The reason for that is, of course, one is to keep the soldiers in good energy and good spirit and keep them active. Also to create a fear of the British Army in the people, because after 1857 War of Independence, they got a huge jolt and they took measures to ensure that such a thing doesn't happen again. That's the reason why they needed to do this. But if they are marching on foot from Madras to Bangalore, they need certain places to stop and rest for a couple of days before resuming. So one such place was Mulubagal. Later when we come to this episode of Shekdar Gundappa, we will go a little more into the details. But here the idea was when they come and they settle at some point, there should be a nice row of trees and some shade. Therefore the British government basically said, we will have different people take care of these trees. And whatever produce comes from the trees every year, that will be given to the person who is taking care, but the trees itself and the land, everything belong to the British. So this was a kind of agreement. So for about 2 furlongs, the trees belonged to his grandfather. In the sense, his grandfather had to supervise these trees and ensure that they grow well and everything, and also he could take the produce. So they were growing honge, that is Indian beech. They were growing hunse, tamarind, then the nerale, jamun, and a dadi pasand variety of mango, mavu. Once these fruits were brought, they especially Dadi Pasand variety, DVG says, I don't know whether this is still available, but half of it would go to making all the pickles and other things, and half of it would be kept in the grass for ripening, so they could be eaten as for mangoes. The tamarind and honge were more valuable because they would make oil and other things. The people who are employed for this task were one Madaya or Mada, Kombina Mada, because he used to blow the bugle, and his son Ramaya or Rama, Kombina Rama. These are the people. So he says these are, they belong to today what we call Harijan community, or they were called Panchamas or Holayas in those days. The Mada also had a government job. So when any important official came, he was supposed to blow the bugle. When Mada became old, his son started blowing the bugle. Now, DVG's grandfather used to send a very young DVG along with Rama and Mada to for the harvesting. So when all the fruits and this thing have to be brought from the trees, he would send DVG. What are the reason? DVG writes, there are 2 possible reasons for this. One is that this is a mischievous kid. He has got summer holidays. If he is going to be at home, he is going to trouble everybody. So let him go, and he will learn some responsibility. DVG must have been 3 or 4, very young age, 5-year-old child. The other reason is also to subtly indicate to the people who are employed that the owners have not completely given up and given the charge to them. There is somebody from the owner's side who is there to keep an eye on things. Obviously, Mada was like, what is this, sir? You don't believe us, you are sending your child. Then the grandfather would say, come on, do you think he will know if you want to steal something, you think he will know? I know you are honest. He is creating mischief at home, so I am sending him. This was the kind of thing. However, Mada and Rama are not supposed to touch DVG, Gundappa, because they are Brahmins and these people are Harijans. So they would get somebody else, some Banajiga or some Vokkaliga, somebody else to carry this boy on the shoulder and go there to that point. He'll spread a jute bag and make him sit down there. Then these Rama and Mada were so sincere that every time they will bring down the jamun or they bring down the hongi or something, they will show it to this young boy. See, this is what it is, and he'll say, okay, very good. This is fine. Finally, when all the work is done, they will call somebody to pick up this boy and walk them back to the house. But DVG writes that, Rama used to wear a very nice shirt and a coat and a rumalu, turban. Those days it was kind of, a person without headgear would not be respected. So irrespective of the jati, varna of the person, they were very well dressed. They were very pleasant in nature. Today, when we see even people who are wealthy dressing so badly, we find that this is so refined, and this shows such high culture. Although there was a difference and there was certain kind of segregation and rules between, the relationship between different communities had certain code of conduct of that era. Even so, the behavior and the culturing of people from various backgrounds were very high. DVG writes that I am recalling this after 75 years. I have not seen anyone belonging to any community who is better than Mada and Rama in terms of human values. Such was their high standard of conduct, grace, truthfulness and integrity. Guna Puja Sthanam. So therefore, although we find the there is a certain segregation, there are certain special privileges for certain communities, special restrictions on certain communities, certain special rules are there for certain communities. But at the end of the day, what is really valued is the human relationship. People valued each other and they were respecting each other. One more person who comes in this episode is Pachappa Mudaliyar, who was the employer of his great uncle, Sheenanna or Sheenappa, his grandfather's second younger brother. Ramanna was his first younger brother, grandfather's second younger brother, Sheenanna or Sheenappa. So he was working as a clerk in the office of this Pachappa Mudaliyar, who was an arak contractor basically. So he was in that business, and he was also a very charitable person. At one point, he had a very huge house, he had a lot of property and everything, but regularly he would do a lot of charitable works. A lot of Brahmanas benefited from his charity, and also he was a little cut up because they were very rude to him, and they were kind of greedy. He used to complain to Sheenanna, and Sheenanna would say, "You are complaining about Brahmanas, then you are donating so much of money." And he said, "Okay, let it be. I will get some punya, so it's okay." So this was the nature of Pachappa Mudaliyar. DVG finally says, "We need not bother ourselves with the frustrated utterances of Pachappa Mudaliyar, but we must remember his generosity which he cultivated by keeping aside his disappointments. Such were the people who lived back then." So each of these people, very, very normal, ordinary citizens, but having such exemplary qualities. That's what is really remarkable in these episodes. Now we come to Bandi Rasool Khan. DVG starts off by saying, "In my entire life, I have passed only 2 examinations. One is the lower secondary in Kannada, then the second is lower secondary in English, which is basically 8th standard in Kannada medium and then 8th standard exams in English medium." So this is the 2 exams he has completed. In fact, in an interview with GP Rajaratnam, he says, I could not complete matriculation. I failed in maths and science and even in Kannada. So he has failed in Kannada also. In few years, one of the books that he wrote was the textbook for the high school on Gopal Krishna Gokhale. It was a prescribed textbook for the high school students, and even college students, I think. After he finished the English lower secondary around 1900, when he was about 13, 14 years old, this was the time there was a discussion on what he should do for the further studies. Then his grandmother said, "He's a young boy, let him be in front of my eyes, he should not leave this place." Also, that was a time just when his grandfather had died. Lawyer Sheshagiraya had passed away, and it was not very easy for money to come by. DVG writes, "In those days, sending money to another town was a difficult task. But food was a totally different story. Food grains were available at home, so even if 10 people landed up at home, to feed them was not a big deal. But to send a quarter rupee or half rupee or 1 rupee to some other town, it was an ordeal." So therefore, his father and father's uncles were hesitant to send him to another town because it would be very expensive. Now, as far as his father was concerned, he was not sure, because at one side of the mind, all the family members are saying, "Let him be here, let him study Sanskrit, let him study the scriptures." And on the other side, some of his friends are like, "He's a sharp kid, you should send him to Mysore or Bengaluru, let him study more, he should learn English, he should learn other things about the world." In the second group, that group of friends, one of the most important people was this Bandi Rasool Khan, or Bandi Rasool Gadu, which is a respectful way of saying Rasool Khan. So he was riding a bullock cart, and he would do namaz. That's what his main activity, DVG says. Along with Hindustani, he was also knew Telugu and Kannada. Like I said, the people of that time were generally very comfortable with 2 or 3 languages. They did not have this language mania. This Bandi Rasool Khan was very particular because he said this boy did not know a word of English. In 2 years after finishing his lower secondary in Kannada, he has passed lower secondary in English. So that means he's very sharp, and he should be sent to learn more. Then I told you that Mudubagal lies on the road from Bangalore to Madras, and this Someshwar Palya, where DVG's grandfather had some trees, that was also the place where this Bandi Rasul Khan stayed. He was staying in that place. There was also an eminent person in Someshwar Palya called Mara Shetty. Mara Shetty was a Telugu teacher, and he had stayed in Mysore for some time and studied under one Venkatacharya, who was his Kulaguru. He was a very well-known person. He also was a good friend of DVG's father. Now, when this friends circle used to meet, probably they met every evening or every other day. One day when they all met, and this topic of DVG's future and education and all these things came up for discussion. Different people said different things, and finally Rasul Khan gave his judgment. He says, you say whatever you want, but this boy must be made to study. Every Saturday I take the bullock cart and go to Robertson Pate. I will go there, and then from there this Bowring Pate is just 3 to 4 miles. Today what is Bangar Pate, 3 to 4 miles. I will buy a ticket and put him in a train from Bowring Pate and send him to Bangalore. And I will give him 1 rupee pocket money. Let him go there and let him study, but his study should not stop. Everybody was amazed listening to this fellow. Here is an illiterate guy. He cannot even read to save his life. And he is giving advice about sending this boy to higher studies. So everybody said, what is this, look who's talking kind of a thing. Then this Rasul Khan, he points out to his heart. He says, something here is telling me that this, do this. He's going to do something big in his life. The next Saturday, he's taken DVG in the cart and he sets out. However, by that time, DVG's father's mind also has changed. So in another bullock cart, DVG's father also comes, and he accompanies DVG to the station. One of the cart drivers in Someshwara Palya is one Bandi Changappa. It's very interesting that DVG remembers all these people who are very, very ordinary folk, but with such vividity he remembers. Now, Bandi Changappa used to drive the bullocks and used to sing in a very beautiful voice as he is moving. Then he also remembers his sister, Bandi Changamma, who was a young girl when DVG was a small boy, and she had to augment the income of her husband, she would come and sell milk in a few houses. DVG writes, well, it was such a delight to see her. She was so neatly dressed and so courteous and so so majestic in her appearance. And he writes, the reason I am describing this in the context is to demonstrate how goodness and demeanor and gentleness in conduct does not necessarily come from great wealth. It comes from inner samskara, cultural refinement. I have seen the families of a few affluent people, and I have wondered, God hasn't gifted them even a tenth of the purity and geniality of the poverty-stricken Changamma. Then later he talks about the song of dawn that Changappa used to sing, and later we don't know what ragas he used, but maybe some Re Gupti or Bhopalam or some early morning ragas were used. So you can imagine a bullock cart driver taking so much of interest in this young boy and bringing him to Bangalore. We can only guess what would have happened if this fellow was not there. What DVG would have done? Maybe he would have come to Bangalore through some other means. We don't know. But many such fortuitous incidents happen in one's life that is very beautifully captured in this episode. Then now we come to Pashampalli Adeppa. Now Pashampalli Adeppa was the Patela of a village. And when DVG was young, his great desire was to become a Patela. What is the reason? One is that, Patela is a free man. He doesn't have to wait for somebody else's order. He can lead life on his own terms. There's another reason is that Patela is respected by all the villagers. He has got a lot of affection of the people. These are the two main reasons. Another reason, very important thing is Patela doesn't have to go and pass exams, and they doesn't have the burden of the schooling and all the tension. So therefore he said, this is my dream. I want to become a Patela. So there is no need to study. I don't have to write exams, and I'm a free person and I'll be respected. At that point of time, he says, my grandfather cured me of my crazy ideas by telling him what is the role of a Patela. Who is qualified to be a headman of a village? This is so beautiful. He says, a headman of a village should have life experiences and understanding of human nature. In addition, he should be a person who gains the affection of the people, gains the trust of the people through his behavior and words. So, who is going to accept a teenage boy as a Patela of a village? So, think about it. Unless a person gains the respect and affection of the people, he cannot be successful as a leader. It is altogether different matter that in his life, his desires were fulfilled. He did not have to write any exams. He was leading his life on his own terms, and he gained the affection and respect of people. So even though he did not become a Patela of a particular village, he gained what he wanted. He mentions that there were few Patelas who were known to his family. One such person was Pashampalli Adeppa, and he was a Telugu-speaking Velnadu Brahmana. This person probably died when DVG was 5-6 years old, so he has seen him only once. He is relating all this story about Pashampalli Adeppa from what he has heard from his elders. So he was the headman of 4 or 5 villages, and he would get what is called the potagi, or the commission from the government for collecting the tax. However, this was a very meager amount, so they had to have some other source of income. So Adeppa had his own lands, and there was never a dearth of grains and pulses from these lands. At the same time, he was very generous. He would feed anybody, and they were very well known for acts of charity. There were certain pulses and grains grown in some part of his lands only for charity. And people staying, there'll be 15 people, 20 people staying in the house, visitors, constant visitors, all kinds of people. No dearth of charitable activity. DVG writes, this is the real Hindu socialism, or the socialist way of life in our country. Because he had so many lands, he never had to go once to a grocery shop and buy anything. Everything was available from his lands. So whether it is sesame seeds to jaggery, everything is available from his fields and gardens. Then they also had some cows and buffaloes and everything. So milk and ghee and curd, all these things were easily available. So good food and peace of mind. This was there at that time, DVG says. However, although Adeppa had all this land and everything, his personal charisma is very important. If you want to successfully be a headman, you must also have certain personality that people respect you and they like you. Because just respecting and fearing somebody will not sustain. Whereas you need to be both loved and feared. Both of them have to be there. So only one of the two cannot happen. Adeppa was he was a cripple by birth, so he could not walk very well. He had a limp. So every morning he'll wake up, he will apply some vibhuti, and he will then climb onto a horse. Somebody will help him because he has to go around the place to collect the tax. So when he was on the ground, he was a cripple. The moment he got onto the horse, he was a man of valor. So DVG says, a cripple on the ground, a hero on the horse. And once he sat on the horse, he would not get down until he comes back home at the end of the tour. So he would go around, and then he will meet people. If there will be somebody who has some problem, they will cry on his shoulder. He will give them some solace. Sometimes he will teach people a lesson if they are dishonest. And he will give some money, he'll give some support, he'll give advice. Like this, when he goes around on the tour, all the people, all the families in the 4 or 5 villages, he would know what's happening with them and take care of them. At the same time, he was very strict when it comes to collecting taxes. There was a proverb that was created in that region, and DVG says it. The proverb is in Telugu, and the style is a bit rural, so we had to bear with the rusticity. Pashampalli Adeppa Garo Pittamante Pittala. So if Pashampalli Adeppa asks you to fart, you fart. So that was the kind of control that he had over the people. So first time when the farmers will say, oh, we don't have the money for the tax, we are in difficult times. The first time he will be very lenient with them. The second time he will give them warning. But when later the third time he comes, then you better pay up. This contrast this with our great non-violence. Non-violence won't get you anywhere. So to some extent, yes, but after a point, non-violence, like somebody, I think one of these actors was saying, Randeep Hooda or something, non-violence will not even get you chocolate. So he was speaking about the greatness of Savarkar in some podcast. He said non-violence will not even get you chocolate. Where will it get freedom for the country? So like that, we need this sternness also. So he's definitely a very affectionate and respected person. But when people are not coming in line, then certain amount of strictness is required. Even with our children, right? If we don't say anything to our children, then it is very difficult. At the same time, if always you are beating your child, they will also turn out to be rogues. So you need a optimum balance between appreciation and scolding or whatever, right? We see the same thing also, because in some sense the village was the Patela's family. He treated these 4 or 5 villages like his own family. So therefore, when people went out of line, he took the liberty to, shout at them. DVG writes how the system, there was no documented rules that were laid down, the fiduciary jurisdiction and the duties and responsibility of the village headman, the village officials and so on. They basically followed the regulations which were, created earlier, especially during the Vijayanagara Empire, the Bara Baluti system, which had 12 branches, or the Dwadashanga. They followed this ancient system, and everybody in the village had value for that common idea. That's how it was able to sustain. So this is the real Swarajya or self-rule. This is democracy, DVG writes. True democracy and true independence of people can survive only when people voluntarily accept certain traditions and institutions, and when the citizens, out of their own volition, are loyal to these traditions and abide by the rules of these institutions. As the laws increase, then the government's interference in people's lives also increase, and when the government's interference extends into public life, then the independence of the people naturally diminishes. So it's very important for us to realize that as long as the citizens are all jointly agreeing to certain rules, then the government needs to interfere less in our lives. Then there are two-part episode called Unsung Poetry, or Aprasiddha Kavitva, I think in Kannada. These 2 episodes are very difficult to translate or to explain in English, because they deal with certain poetic elements and compositions which can best be appreciated in Kannada, or in translation if you read the Kannada and English together, but it's very difficult to speak about it. So what I'll do is I will just try to give you a sample of one such poem. Here he starts off by saying that, in this discussion, poetry isn't the proverbial tough nut to crack. We are not talking about Pampa and Ranna and Kumaravyasa, Harihara, Rudrabhatta, Narana, all these people, Shadakshari and all that. We are talking about people who are just composing poems and composing verses for fun. He says it's like a dwarf trying to pick a coconut from a tree, or a singer who, after opening his mouth to sing, ends up burping or yawning and not singing. So it's basically something very light-hearted. Those days, the way of entertainment was composing these verses. One of his paternal aunts had come up with a small verse about DVG. Gundam Bhandam Tindiki Shuram Chandala Munde Gandam. Now, Gunda, the rascally, the champion of gluttony, and the lowly, wretched rogue. Of course, the last line cannot be translated into English, even if we need a big vyakhana. If you know what it is, you know what it is. So this is, DVG says, the first Navya Kavya I heard 75 years ago. That means when he must have been a very young lad. So his father's sister, his paternal aunt had composed this. That means, he's a hard-headed guy and he's a glutton. Basically, that's the tatparya of this verse. DVG writes that before hearing this verse, I remember in bits and pieces the few verses I had learnt in Sanskrit, Kannada, Telugu, Marathi. And his grandfather was familiar with all these languages, and he also knew some Urdu and Farsi. Then it was a system. In fact, some days ago when I was discussing with Dr. S.R. Ramaswamy, he was mentioning to me that the system of education in those days was that the elders and the teachers would teach whatever they knew to the students. So many times it is not possible to have a standardized syllabus and everybody learning the same thing. All that the teacher knew, all that the elders knew were passed on to the next generation. Today we find that although there is a certain standardization and so forth, there are so many details, so many things that the parents know that children have no idea about. Even if you take a language, for example, the parents may be speaking in Kannada and Telugu and English, but the child only knows English, or child only knows some one language. So this passing on of the best of the previous generation used to happen very seamlessly in those days. So if the teacher was from Maharashtra and knew Marathi, he will teach some Marathi poems, he will teach Das Bodh, he will teach some Samartha Ramdas poems. If somebody is from Tamil Nadu, they will teach some Bharadiyar Padal or something, whatever, some Villiputtur Bhagavata, some Mahabharata and so on. So whatever they knew, whether it is Kamba Ramayanam or somebody knows some Kural, or here if somebody has studied Kumaravyasa or Pampa, they would teach that whatever they knew, they would try to pass it on to the next generation. So in this manner, when we see that DVG has learnt so many things outside of what normally you would think. So even though there is a matriculation fail, so many other things he has learnt. As a part of this verse, as a part of this chapter, DVG talks about the household atmosphere. He says during those days there were 10 or 15 people in the house. It was very common for 15-20 people to eat a meal together at the same time on multiple days. Imagine today if 20 people come together and eat a meal, then it must be some very big occasion. Those days, normally every day in the evening there will be 10, 15, 20 people eating food together, because it was the era of love and affection and the era of surplus. So there always, so like I said, money was not very easy to come by, but food was available in surplus. So paddy and tur dal, ragi, moong dal, all these things were readily available from the fields. DVG writes that tur was being cultivated in their house. So it is an elaborate process, and I used to regularly participate. Even now, if somebody wants to learn, I can teach the person, he says, to how to make togri bede, tuar dal. Then the paddy was pounded to separate the husk and get the rice. Tamarind was available. Then honge seeds, anyway, we had that honge tree was there. Then that was given to the Ganigas, who will make honge oil and give it to them. So half of the honge oil will be used for all the lighting of the lamps and things like that. Then the other half, whatever is there, will be bartered for this thing, gingerly oil, which was used for cooking. So like this, you'd get all the thing easily available. And his great uncle Ramanna used to have a money lending business, and some of the sugarcane farmers who could not repay all the money would give some jaggery. So like this, all the ingredients were easily available. So they used to have this kind of grand meals, and every year there will be few shraddhas, 6 or 7 shraddhas will be there, so elaborate meal. Then all the children's birthdays, so many children, so 5 or 6 birthdays, every birthday they will make some sweet dish or some chakli or puliyangai unde or some set of muchore, all these kind of savories. Given this, DVG says like all these things were happening, so therefore the day-to-day meals were very boring. I would rather go and eat some chakli or kod bade or puliyangai unde, and for that it won't be in the main this thing, it will be in the storeroom. So they will go secretly to the storeroom, and although you go secretly, quietly, it is never a silent thing, because something will fall in your urgency, something will think, and everything will fall on the ground, it will create a big noise, and somebody will hear this and come and give a good thrashing. So that is the origin of the Tindiki Shuram that his aunt had created a verse. Like this, his paternal aunt, he says, used to create different verses, making fun of different people. Then he has also spoken about some of the other such verses, which of course, like I said, it's very difficult to translate and must be enjoyed in the quietness of sitting and reading it yourself. However, there are some other aspects in this episode which I like to tell you. So there is one Sheikh Dawood Sahib. He had completed his lower secondary in Kannada, Telugu and Urdu. So like DVG had completed in Kannada and English, he had completed the lower secondary in 3 languages and he had got a first class in all the 3 languages, which was a very rare thing. Which was those days, he says, equivalent of a D.Lit or Mahapadhyaya. This was the great qualification those days. And he was highly respected. Now, DVG writes, in the Mysore kingdom, the idea of the upliftment of Harijans, making all the citizens of the state literate and educated, were in vogue many decades before Gandhi and Gokhale. Although DVG had such regard for Gandhi and Gokhale, he makes it a point to mention that long before these people, it was Mysore Samsthanam which was interested in uplifting all its citizens. So even during Diwan Sheshadri Iyer's time itself, they had established 2 different kinds of schools later part of the 19th century. One was for adults, which was a night school if there are adults who are uneducated, illiterate, so a night school for them, and a Panchama Pathshale or a school for Dalits should be established. And Chandrasekhara-Shastri, who was the principal of the school, headmaster of the school, high school in Mudabagal, he had recommended Sheikh Dawood Sahib's name for the Panchama Pathshale, and he earned a very good reputation as a teacher there. So we see that long before the rest of India, in the Mysore Samsthana, this kind of forward thinking was there. In fact, I think it will be a great study if somebody writes about the social contributions of Modi Krishnaraja Wadiyar, Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wadiyar, and that period before independence, the greatness of the Mysore Samsthana. Maybe there are some books, but this particular aspect of the social reform and the social life of that period under the rule of the Maharaja may be a very good study. So like this, in the second part of the unsung poetry, DVG again talks about some of the different kinds of verses. What we see here as a kind of takeaway from this is composing poetry, and especially composing metrical poetry, was something which was so normal in those days, became within a matter of 2 generations totally lost art. And only I think now, because of Dr. Ganesh's efforts and few people like this, there is again a small revival of people composing in classical meters in Hadagannada and Sanskrit. Otherwise, it is completely no school, no college, no institution teaches this as a part of their curriculum. Everybody, they will teach how to study and scansion and then cutting this thing and dissecting, like you dissect a frog, you dissect a poem with a fork and knife, that they will teach in MA classes. But composing a poem, writing something on the spot is not taught. And like any other art form, it can be taught, it can be learnt. Whether it's music or dance or composing poetry or drawing beautiful sketches, all these things can be taught. Of course, only few people will be able to excel and become of a very high caliber. But it is possible for anybody to do it competently. That is the strength of our classical arts. So those days we see that people were very casually writing verses. In fact, DVG laments that unfortunately they did not get a chance to write about some grand themes. They were, writing about some government official and some small chotte stuff. If they had a grand theme in front of them, probably they might have written a Mahakavya, because they had that sort of depth and knowledge and vocabulary. Now we go to the final episode in this 7th volume. It's a very beautiful episode in its entirety. It's called Hakkiya Payana, the journey of a bird. And DVG says it is impossible for anyone to know the nature of one's inherent dispositions with certainty. And he says, if I were to speak about my own innate nature, it comprises 2 inclinations. One is vagabondage, or wanderlust, if you want to say it in a more dignified way. The other is cowardice, or a state of fear and hesitation. Then DVG goes on to explain what he's saying by these words. Vagabondage may be described as the impetuous act of roaming about at will without attaching oneself to any responsibilities. Cowardice may be defined as being timidly submissive to some purpose or ideal. Now, both of these are mutually opposite impulses. So, how can it be there in the same person? Then we see that from his childhood, DVG has had a great attraction to yogis and dasayas and bairagis, ascetics, sannyasis, all these kind of people. He always used to wonder, will I ever get a chance to be like these people? They are so free and they are roaming about wherever they like. They are not troubled by any adversities. Will I ever get a chance to, be a parivrajaka and lead this life of a wandering mendicant, which is a carefree life, unfettered by anxiety. Such a beautiful, it's very nice, right? When you think about it. Oh, there is no responsibility, there is no boss, there is no wife, there is no husband, no kids, no somebody shouting down at you or nothing. Absolutely free, you can go anywhere you want, you have, no such restrictions. They also don't worry what will happen tonight, where am I going to get my food tonight, or where will I be tomorrow morning. They are not bothered about it. So it is really a remarkable thing. DVG says, now if this was such a wonderful and attractive proposition for me, and when I looked at these people I was so impressed, why didn't I take up this lifestyle? Why didn't I also become a yogi? He says, because of cowardice. And this cowardice or timidity has two aspects. The first is a very deep regard for society and traditions. Now, the second is a fear of difficulties that the body will have to endure. See how honest he is. It is very easy to be romantic and think, oh, it will be so nice to be a parivrajaka without any responsibility. But what does it mean? That means you must be willing to sacrifice a lot of the comforts, not just physical comforts, but also emotional comforts. Also other kind of advantages of being in a network, in a social network. So fear of hardship. He says, I spent my childhood in comfort and had sumptuous meals and soft bed and tasty delicacies and all these things. So if I went about living as a Gramaika Ratri, so spending only one night in a village or in a town, not spending 2 continuous nights in the same place, imagine. So always moving, always moving. If you are to spend like that, then what will happen to all my snacks? I need to have some snacks and nice food and everything. What about the pillows and the bed? So therefore, this fear of physical hardships was one of the reasons. Also, the societal fear of society, he says, because possibly due to the influence of dialogues of Socrates or other such works, and also because of the samskara at home, that you have certain responsibility towards parents, or towards your wife, towards a husband, child, all these things socially, there are certain training that we have as a child. So therefore, we are not inconsiderate to people in our family. So therefore, this although the elders in his family had given him substantial freedom, he had this respect for tradition and also the fear of physical hardships, which is why he never went about this path of becoming ascetic. Then he talks about a group of Godavari Brahmanas who in the 1900s, 1910s, in the early part of the 20th century, the Godavari region was very arid, devoid of any water works and no canals and no rivers, irrigation systems and so on. So a lot of Brahmanas from there would constantly go on some kind of Tirtha Yatra to Rameshwaram, to Tirupati and so on. So whenever they come to these, go on a Tirtha Yatra, those days you have to walk, there is no other way. Maybe you may get a bullock cart, but largely it was by walk. So when they walk, they will come to Mulubagal, they will halt there. There was a chaudhry, a satra, like a kind of a dharamshala, which is basically free lodging and place to stay, which is built by some charitable person. In this case, it was the family of the Tavvas, a very dharmic Vaishya family, had built the satra. So anybody can come and stay for either a very nominal amount or free of cost. This was the front portion of the Anjaneya Swami Devasthana. So they will stay there, and then they will come to some Brahmana's house, and they will say, that we are from this Godavari area. Is this a Brahmana's house? And if the person says yes, this is Brahmana's house, he will say, would it be inconvenient for the Yajamana of this house if I partake of a meal? Now, even the person who was the Yajamana of the house, he would be very happy to have visitors. It was a time when, like I said, food, if suddenly 10 people show up also, there is no problem for food. So you say, oh, most welcome, please, would you like to have a dip in the river and then come and eat? Absolutely no problem. So they would basically have a dip in the river and come, and they would typically recite about half an hour or so of Vedic mantras before even starting taking their food. So they would sit and they would recite Veda, then they would have their food. DVG writes that, preparing food for these people were very, very straightforward. They basically wanted some rice and tawwe and something spicy, pappu dapalam, some gojju or some chutney or something, that's all. And if one of the people tried to serve some rasam or tili saro, they will say jabbu ledandi. That means we are not unwell, we are fit. So for them, rasam was only for patients. So they were very happy with the tawwe and the pappu dapalam, which is basically spicy, and they were very happy. Typically, they would not eat a meal at night, so they would have in the afternoon. So it was not at all a burden to feed them. They would wake up early in the morning, walk some miles, then they would stay at some place, have some meal, and again they would walk for a little bit in the evening and rest at some dharmachatra. They would carry a Shivalinga, Banalinga, and they would do some Rudrabhisheka. When 2 or 3 people together would recite Namaka and Chamaka, it would sound like one strong voice. That was the kind of practice that they had. So DVG says, although he had this nature of vagabondage or wanderlust, it was suppressed because of the covered eyes, but every now and then it would again sprout up. This was inherent inside, so he always had this tendency to, at some point of time, be attracted. So once what happened in 1908 or 09, this was episode that happened in his life. He was walking on the tank bund of the Dharmamudi Kere, which today has become the majestic bus stop. Earlier, that entire place in front of the city railway station was a big lake. So he was walking on the tank bund of the Dharmamudi Kere, which is facing the railway station, and he saw some Bairagis sitting under a peepal tree. And they were sitting towards the south of the lake, and they were just sitting and chatting, and this was probably early in the morning. So DVG said, oh, this, it was so attractive that I longed to spend the whole day with them. So he is also a journalist, that's a different story, but he was really eager to see what they do and spend the day with them. This morning, and about 5 Bairagis, they are all from North India. They had smeared gopi chandana, sandalwood paste on their face, and then some of them carried some kamandalu water pots, and then some of them had this long iron strips with bells. In the North India, they just clap it like this, and that will make a ringing sound. So that's also used when they go for bhiksha. They also had a small fire burning, maybe they were making some food or something. They all finally, after a point of time, they all stood up and said Jai Sita Ram and started walking on the Kempegowda road. So slowly they started walking in a Pradakshanakara, in a circumambulatory way. They will just be shouting, Balaji, Palaka Sita Ram, or Balaji, Bihari Ram, and this kind of some Udgaras. Finally, they landed up at Doddapete. This was the place where Sajjan Rao, we know the Sajjan Rao circle, and also we have seen the great personality of Sajjan Rao and his philanthropy and everything. So they used to go to Sajjan Rao's shop, and I had also mentioned how he was also very fond of these kind of Bairagis and mendicants, and did a lot of charitable work for such people. So when they go to Sajjan Rao's shop, immediately for the Sadavarta, that food for the charity, he will give some 1 or 2 rupees to his assistant, and the assistant will go with these Bairagis to a shop and purchase all that things that they want for their meal. So wheat flour and rice flour, then a little bit of ghee and some chilies and salt and all these kind of things. Then the Bairagis went to Mandhata's Mithai shop. Then there he gave them some sweets and something, he put that together. Then they passed through the Rana Singh Pete. That Rana Singh Pete is basically when you are coming from Majestic railway station to Mysore Road. At that, on the Cottonpate main road, when you hit the Mysore Road, the portion to the left side till the BVK Road, that entire zone is the Rana Singh Pete, basically. So they went to the Rana Singh Pete and then Arali Pete and then finally came back to the railway station, sat under the peepal tree and they said Jai Sita Ram and sat down. And two of them took the wheat flour and they mixed it with water and they prepared, basically they prepared the salt and chilies and everything. They made rotis. And 5 of them, they washed their hands. Then when 2 of them were preparing the rotis, 3 of them dipped in the water, had a dip and came, and then other 2 went and had a bath. Then they did some japam and all this thing. They performed achamana and they recited some mantras. They offered arghya. Finally, they took the piece of roti and saying some Hare Ram or Jai Ram or something. They were speaking in Hindi and they ate their food. Must have been 1 in the afternoon by the time they had their meal, and then they probably just lie down under the peepal tree to have a nap. So DVG immediately rushed from there to KT Appanna's house in Chamrajpet to quickly finish his lunch, and by the time he came back, they were all in deep sleep in the afternoon siesta. After about maybe couple of hours of sleeping, by about 4 in the afternoon, they woke up and they went and washed their faces and they got ready. Then they took out a smoking pipe and put some coconut fibers and some ganja tablets and they started smoking some ganja. At that point of time, DVG was a little scared. He said, "Oh, you should not hang out with people who smoke ganja after it is sundown." And he went away. And he never saw them again. But it was very common for these kind of Bairagis to come to Bangalore and other places. They would typically come, to places after hearing it from some of the seniors or elders or people who already had visited Bangalore. So they knew which are the places that they can rest. They knew which are the places that they could get their Sadavarta. They would get something to eat, some, place where they would not be disturbed. So they already knew all these places and accordingly they would plan their travel. Now DVG also had couple of schemes having association with these Bairagis and pilgrims and Gosais and all that. He had a couple of schemes. So one scheme was what he calls as Sharadakasha Vikshane. Sharat is of course autumn, Akasha is sky, and Vikshane is the glancing or seeing, gazing. So the sky gazing during autumn. Now for this kind of, even to look at the sky, many times I feel that a lot of people don't even look at the sky because they're all so busy looking down, looking at the computer, looking at the mobile, looking at things. You don't even look at the sky. So if somebody has to put a WhatsApp thing saying, "Look at the moon today, it's very beautiful." So then we will see, "Oh, today moon is very nice." Otherwise, on our own, we don't see moon or sun. And for people living in the city, it's probably been a long time since they saw sunrise or sunset, especially sunset. It's a luxury. For that, we need to have certain leisure. In school, we had a poem which was called Leisure by W.H. Davis. So then he says, "Poor life, this if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare." So we are so busy, we don't have time to stand and stare and observe nature. But this is DVG's plan. He says 4 or 5 friends. First of all, it's important to have 4 or 5 friends. Without that, this plan won't work. 4 or 5 friends start from Bangalore on foot. Along with them, there will be 2 or 3 bullock carts. The first bullock cart will have all the necessary cooking items. So firewood and kerosene and all the paraphernalia for cooking. The second bullock cart will have avalakki and hurittu, pullangai, chakli, kodbade, all the boxes of savories. Then little small mattresses and so on. The third bullock cart will be for people who may not be able to walk all the distance. If they want little rest on the way, they can sit in the bullock cart and come while the rest of them are walking. Now getting all these bullock carts ready, they start from Bangalore at 5 in the morning, slowly move towards Mulubagal. Now every day you can walk certain amount of maybe 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, whatever. You walk till about 8:30 in the morning from 5. 3 hours of walking. Maybe you will cover about 12 to 15 kilometers. Then you stop at some point where there is little open area and set up all the cooking equipment, then go to some nearby village, get some milk and curd and whatever, or some grocery, whatever required, and you cook a nice meal and relax there, and maybe go to some nearby matha or some temple and just hang out there. By the time it's evening, after sundown also it becomes cool, you can start walking again, walk another 4 or 5 miles, and then you rest at a particular place. Like this, if you are walking every day a certain amount of kilometers, within about 4 or 5 days you will reach Mudabagal. Now, having reached Mudabagal, anyway it's his hometown, he will go around the place and spend some time, 2-3 days. Finally, come back in the same manner. So totally it's an expedition of about 15 days. So when DVG discussed this with his friends, they all said, oh, fantastic, what a brilliant idea, very good, we should do this. But they did not lift a finger in the direction of making it happen, which happens even today, right? Whenever we have a discussion, we say, oh, we see something on YouTube or something in Nepal or something in Gujarat, or we see, oh, there's a rare at some temple in Madhya Pradesh. Oh, let us go there sometime. Yeah, we will, this summer holidays, we will go there, and nothing happens. Because of so many family responsibility and other, you have to take your wife and kids or husband and kids, as the case may be, to some place, or your mother wants to go to Sringeri, or your father wants to go to some Kumbakonam. So you cannot go to all these exotic places or do any of these things. Another interesting scheme that DVG had was a simplified Tirtha Yatra. So this was a scheme that his brother-in-law and he had put a plan. Both of them had become widowers, they had lost their wives, they were alone. So they said we should do this, it's a great idea. The preparation that they had to make for this was, each of them would have a small rolled jamakhana and place it on the shoulder. Then they will have a bag like a bangle seller with opening on both the sides. One section of the bag, they would have a shawl and 2 dhotis and 2 small dhotis and towels and a panchapatre and all this kind of thing, vibhuti, japamala kind of things. Then the other side, there will be a few pencils, a panchanga or a diary, a knife and a small notebook. They also would have one thing which has a small packet of avalakki and hurittu and one maybe some dried kobri, then hurigadu, kodbale, these kind of things. Triphala churna and quinine tablets, small box of Vaseline, almost like a tour, this thing he has given, all the things you have to carry, a candle, matches, then Vaseline, thing. Then in brother-in-law's bag, all these items plus little table salt. Then they would wear the banyan, which is a stitched banyan, which has, you would have seen the older generation, will have a pocket around the stomach area. There will be a nice pocket. So keep some money there, and then wear some kurta or whatever, and they will wear a small dhoti tied as a turban, and of course chappal and everything. Another thing, they will have a small water pot which is hanging from the elbow. So like this, easy to carry. And a long stout staff which is for walking stick, which will also look dangerous to other people. So if you carry a stick, other people will get a little scared. So you do all this, and Jai Parameshwara, you start. Then from Bengaluru, they will go to Hindupur and then plan the next course of action, go to some nearby temple. So basically, I think a lot of this is inspired by what our Shiva Pichai Mudaliar had done. So it's almost like that, like I had in the early discussion, the first volume, Shiva Pichai Mudaliar used to do exactly this. So this must have been inspired by that, at least in part. Now there are certain limitations that were imposed on this, for this Tirtha Yatra. That the snacks in the bag should not be consumed too fast. It should be consumed at an appropriate speed. Only when the need arises, we must have the snacks. We should not finish it off. Then the weight of the bag should not be increased. This is very important, because even recently when I had gone to Kumbh Mela, I was just carrying a simple backpack with one set of clothes and few things, not very heavy, but to walk so many kilometers with that backpack, I felt it was so heavy. So sometimes when we really, the test of our, what we should have is, if you can carry it on your back and walk for a few miles, then that's all we really require. That we must try to bring it down to that at some point of time in our life. Then everything should be in moderation, DVG says. The money should be spent with restraint. And finally, he says whatever food they eat, they should eat it in the house of a Brahmana. whoever they may be, irrespective of what Pangada, you should eat in a house of a Brahmana, which is whatever, their particular restriction. Another thing was eating was forbidden at night. However, if they are really hungry, then they can go to some temple and have a prasada. In fact, I remember Dr. Ganesh was mentioning when he had gone to meet DVG's nephew, Mr. Chandramouli, DVG's brother Ramarao's son. Chandramouli sir told Ganesh sir that after DVG's wife died, DVG had practically stopped eating dinner. He had given up his meal after that period of time. So that was that much of affection he had for his wife, and so he was so strict in certain areas of his food. Then he says there was not much difficulty in executing this plan because brother-in-law's pension was there was no problem. But even before all these things could be put in place, the brother-in-law passed away, and then I had to give up all the schemes, and then I had to content myself with troubling all the young friends I had, DVG says. So, and finally he concludes this book with a nice verse which says, "Fortunate is the one who has none to lament for him and none he has to lament for." Almost reminding us of Bhagavad Gita verse in the 2nd chapter. And he says, "Truly fortunate is one who doesn't follow anyone and has no followers." So that is the life of a Parivrajaka. With this, we come to the end of the 7th volume. I think I'm also out of time. So tomorrow we will take a look at the 8th volume. Tomorrow and day after I will cover the 8th volume, and we'll conclude this. Thank you so much for a patient hearing.